Okay, so
Uh,
yeah, click on that YouTube link that Anthony sent. We'll be seeing you.
okay, okay. I think now I understand the. Can you see me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I hope. So, so this other YouTube link, this okay.
That bit link, that bit link that Miss Bolwat first sent.
Yes, yes.
I don't know. I don't think we're using it because I opened it and it's not opening. It's
It's
saying error.
opening. It's saying error,
Error.
abi?
Yes. So I don't think we are using it again.
Well, see, I click on this. Okay. So this first one is one you click that we are linking together now. Okay. So let me see if let me call it. Let's see, you para for me small. Make I call am. Hey, my oga, oh, hey, first time.
Start off your microphone. It's live streaming on YouTube already.
Uh, yes, sir. I've sent you the link. Uh, let me see. Okay. Okay. But are we sure that Anthony has done the sending? That's the thing. Okay, I've done my part. Yeah, the anchor, Mr. Nicole, can you still see me on YouTube? Hello, Nicole. Hello. Hello.
Testing 1 2. Victor, confirm you can hear me. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Victor, confirm you can hear me.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. This is Nicole. I can hear you.
All right. Let's commence the session, please. I believe that the facilitator is around. We have our viewers already on the platform ready to commence the class. So we do not keep the people waiting too long. Mr. Rotimi Ajasa, you're welcome. Please, can you hear us?
Yeah, good morning. I can hear you very well, loud and clear. How are you all
Oh,
doing?
beautiful, beautiful. Please, can we grant him access or make him a co-host so that he has the full functionality of the application, so that there is no need for needing any administrator during the session? Let's make it as seamless as possible. Victor or Nico, please grant him co-host access. No, please grant Mr. Rotimi Ajata the co-host access. Make him a co-host. I see that you made me and a couple of other people make Mr. Rotimi Ajasa the facilitator a co-host. All right, beautiful. Mr. Rotimi, you are now a co-host. You have access to all of the functionalities. Please go. You can take it off from here, sir.
Hello. Good morning. Mr. Rotimi, I don't know if you can hear me. Hello, sir. Hello, Mr. Rotimi. Can you hear me, sir? I don't know if Mr. Rotimi can hear.
Yeah, hello, good morning once again. Sorry, I think I was frozen for a little while, but
Okay, we can hear you now, sir.
all right, thanks a lot. So let me have the privilege elevation, please, so that I can proceed.
Okay, if you can hear me, you're welcome, sir. We are live in this session, and to everyone, we have Mr. Rotimi here, who is the main speaker for today. So, Mr. Rotimi, please, you may go ahead, sir.
All right, thanks a lot. I'm also trying to share the slide, but I will need the privilege access. Can you please grant that, please? So while I'm still waiting for my privilege to be elevated so that I can share my screen, let me just do some little introduction about myself. So my name is Rotimi Ajasa. I'm a director of training and education with the Cybersecurity Expertise of Nigeria session. And today I'm facilitating this particular section, which is on the ethical hacker. This is it's going to last for some few weeks, and I'm sure for the past previous weeks you've been able to delve into different understanding on ethical hacking and how you could also leverage on some tools, techniques, and skills while performing this. While you may have also noted that there has been a difference between what is hacking is and the ethical part, we really want to be sure that we maintain the professional conduct when it comes to being an ethical hacker. And that means that whatever in which you are to do must have an authorization, and the authorization must also be documented by an appropriate individual. So which means you do not and you should not make use of any of the skills in which you've learned in an unethical way. And that means you must have an authorization before you perform any of this from the right individual who is supposed to provide those authorization. I believe.
Hello, okay. Hello, sir. Mr. Rotimi. Okay, yes, I've given you that permission. All right.
Yeah, I've seen that. So, what have we learned so far? While we have had some few period to discuss or to deliberate on different parts of ethical hacking, I'm going to talk more on this third section, which is section 3, on a theoretical approach to ethical hacking. Then the next section will be more on a practical approach to this. So to prep you for the next section, I am going to ask you to do something in case if you have not done that. I will ask to get because we'll get our hands just a little bit dirty during the next section, and we will not have the luxury of time to start installing some of the necessary tools or software. So before the next section, which will commence by next week, the next time, I will want you to have downloaded necessary tools and software. So the major one in which is needed or is required for this is a particular operating system that is called Kali Linux. So you do your few research and try to download Kali Linux. And you can download the updated version so far, which I believe was released about maybe 2-3 months ago. Then you also need to be in a very safe environment. And when we talk about safe environment, it means that you do not unnecessarily expose any of your ethical tools in a real world scenario. So one of the best way in which you can do that is that you will have to download some few software which will help you to be in a virtual mode. So we can have your virtual toolbox that might be much appropriate for you to use at this particular time. So try to also find a virtual toolbox that will help you doing our next modules. What that is going to do is all what we are going to install will be on that virtual machine. So try to research few virtual toolbox that you can use and get that also downloaded. Then on it, you can now install your Kali Linux, which we will use during our next lesson. So having said that, let's proceed with what we have for today. There's a few recap here. And this recap talks about what was learned in the first module, which is module 1. And the few things that you have learned so far will probably be on the history of the internet. You've known how internet evolved over the years. You may have also known what security is about. And at times, when you looked at the internet, it's more like a global network of communication. Initially, you may be able to communicate with one person or another within a very little range or small range. But now it's more global. So the interconnectivity of devices brings the word internet. And it has really evolved to the extent whereby your connectivity or your connection over the next to different places, to different people, now pose a very security threat. And that's why we now talked about security. Because anytime in which you are connected to the internet, you need to send an information. You want to be sure that those informations are not getting to the wrong person, or you also want to be sure that whoever you are sending the information to will be able to get the necessary information that is needed at that particular time and is not getting more than what is required. You may have also learned how cybersecurity really evolved. So anytime we looked at the internet, we looked at security, the combination of the two brings what the security of the internet is. So don't really look at it as one big fancy word, cybersecurity. We are just talking about the space, the cyberspace, how you can secure it. And this now falls on the responsibility of everyone. And that's why you're also here to learn what can you do to get more secure and to also have that confidence that you are doing your own part in ensuring total security. Or even if total security, which in most cases could not be obtained, but at least you are doing your best to ensure that the security in which you are providing at a particular time is adequate, both for the situation at hand and for the purpose in which it's meant for. You may have also learned about the features of cybersecurity, the CIA triad. And there we talk about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So you will always remember your confidentiality in the extent that is the message I'm trying to pass to someone, is it only going to get to that person alone, or it's going to get to those who do not really need this message? So how you are able to demonstrate that will depend on what really are the mechanism in which you put in place to ensure that it's only that right set of people or person gets that message at that particular time. Do you have some access control in place, or is there a means to authenticate whoever is being sent those information? So that's part of the features of cybersecurity that you must have learned. We also have the integrity part. And most time when we talk about integrity, we talk about the accuracy of the data or the information in which we are sending. Is it really accurate? Is it consistent? Is it what can be said to be trustworthy at a particular time? So whenever your information are not accurate, that what you sent, maybe somebody has manipulated some things from what you sent, then we'll say there's an issue with the integrity of the information. So imagine you are sending a message and the message is ABC, but when it gets to the other person, it's saying CBA, for example. It shows that you cannot really rely on the accuracy of that information, and that's where integrity comes in. And for availability, you may use the experience of the banking industry. Imagine you want to access your statement of accounts and going online or going to the bank to get your statement of accounts. You are told that, oh, sorry, our network is down. We can't get you those information at this time. That can really be frustrating, because it's information that you should have access to and it should be available to you at any time in which you demand for it. Any moment in which you could not have access to those informations that you should have access to, then we'll say availability issue is at stake. So those are the three major triads of cybersecurity: the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Your information should get to the right person who needs it. There should not be any tampering or manipulation of those information, and it should be available whenever the user needs it or requests for it. And the needs of cybersecurity comes in your module 1, where we talked about how can cybersecurity professional help to ensure that those triads, which are the three fundamental blocks of cybersecurity, it ensures that those triads always fall in line as best as possible. And that is where cybersecurity really comes in, to ensure that all these necessary tools or necessary procedures or features are in place. And if there's anything that is going to cause any changes to it, you should also be able to quickly spot it and provide necessary measure to it. You may have also seen hacking over the course of your first module. And whenever you hear the word hacking, it simply means that you are gaining access to a resources, data, information that you are not authorized to do. So anytime you are not authorized to do something, to gain access or to make use of what it's not yours, so to say, we can really say that is a matter of hacking. Then when we now looked at the type of hacking that occurred, we can now leverage it into three different ways. So we now said, okay, if you do not have that access or you do not have that particular approval to manipulate, to come into a system, to break into a network, if you do not have that particular privilege and you don't have the authorization, will always be called a black hat hacker. So however it looks like, the word black hack has been used over the years to show that you do not have the permission, the authorization to perform any of these hacking techniques. While also the other part in which we can also be aware, or the other type of hacker, will also be the white hacker. And this white hat hacker, this time, it's where we really want to focus on, which should be what the ethical part is. So in ethical hacking, you are to have that authorization to be able to perform those particular skills, those particular techniques. And when you have the authorization to do it from the authorized individual, so let's say it's the owner of the business, for example, that is giving you the authorization, you can say this is the authorized individual who asked me to perform this. And that's why some organizations, before they could be able to perform any testing, especially penetration testing, because what they do in penetration testing for any of the organizations that perform that is they are trying to behave like a black hat hacker, but they now have an approver to do that. So the moment we they have an approver from an authorized person, they become a white hat hacker. Then in between these two is where we have the gray hat hacker. So for the gray hats, they sit in between. They might become a very good person, a white person at this time, and maybe something else happen. They want to fall into the black side. I'll give you a typical example. Let's assume that while you are working you probably have worked for a very long years as an ethical hacker, for example, and maybe there's a little mistake that occur and somebody now hacked you yourself. And when the person hacked you, you probably lost a lot of money and so, and you really need to recover some funds back. And you know, if you go through the right channels, it's probably going to take a long time. Maybe you inform the authorities, it's going to take you a long time. You decide that, oh, I'm going to hack this person back. You do not have an authorization to do that. So you have turned from a white hacker to a black hacker. And at times, it's always very difficult sometimes to really draw the line between a white hacker and a gray hacker sometimes, because we've seen some challenges that comes and a white hacker turns into a gray hacker at times. So just to recap some of what's been done initially, and I've discussed about the motive of black hat hacker, and part of just their motive is they just want to gain those unauthorized access. And sometimes it may be some might just do it for fun, and some they may be state sponsored, like there's a government backing who just really need those information. Some they may do it for financial gains, they just want to earn money. They really need money to be able to do some few things. So you can have different motives that come from that. And when you really become an ethical hacker, you will help to secure any of this exposure, any of these risks that could really take place at any time. And you also must have discussed about the different phases of ethical hacking, and we will talk about one of those phases today. So you must talk about your reconnaissance for some times and your scanning. We will also look at some other parts of the phase today. And when it comes to the legality of ethical hacking, it really involves you having the authorization to perform it. And most time, and in most cases, it's always advisable that ensure that the authorization is documented. So if tomorrow someone come and said, we discovered that you are the one who has done this, because you may leave a trace behind, and tomorrow someone comes and do some few investigation, discover that that you are the one who has performed one particular action, and you are being called on. Why did you do this? You should be able to have a backing in place why you have been able to perform that action. So ensure that whenever you need to perform any hacking skills, procedures, you already have a backing. You have an authorized, documented backing in place. And always remember the code of conduct. We really, at every single time, really want to maintain that high level of integrity in whatever we are doing, professionalism in whatever we are doing. We get the right approval before we can conduct any of this. Without getting any necessary approval, please do not attempt any of what is being taught. Then in module 2, I believe you would have learned about the network basics and fundamental, the basic TCP/IP concepts, what IP addresses, ports are. You may have also be able to understand that we have about there's an open system interconnectivity OSI layer, which is about 7 different layers that shows how informations or communication really takes place. And that will help you to understand how networking really occur, how the different standards are being used for communication in the computer system. You probably also talked about the network topology and architecture. It might be a bus topology that is being used, it might be a star topology, how they all ensure that connectivity it's being sent across in the best way based on your budget also and based on the organization in which you are at the moment. There are some few devices that are used for connectivity. You talked about your router, your switch, and the defense mechanism, which is your firewall, also must have been talked about. Footprinting, reconnaissance, you must have also heard about the different techniques that are being used for footprinting, how information are being gathered from the targets, different tools that could also be used for footprinting. That's what you should have been able to learn during the first 2 modules. Now, this third modules, module 3, as I said, it's going to be more of theoretical part, while the next module we discuss more on the practical part of this. So for these modules, we will learn about, after we have looked through some of the few stages that has been discussed so far, your reconnaissance, your footprinting, your scanning, we'll now look at information in which you have access to. How can you now exploit those information? What are the different tools or frameworks that you can use to exploit it? In what areas could you be able to exploit it also? You will talk more about exploitation. So what exploitation does majorly is you are leveraging on the vulnerability that you have seen over the few, maybe you probably would have done your footprinting, your scanning for few months, few days, or few weeks. You now want to leverage on those vulnerabilities, those weaknesses in which you have seen so far, so that you can gain an unauthorized access into the system. You cannot gain those unauthorized access easily without you first doing enough gathering of information, enough footprinting, or enough scanning. But immediately you're able to gather most of those information, you now want to say, now I have seen that there's a vulnerability here. Can I exploit this vulnerability? Can I take it further? Can I now use it? I have seen that there's a weakness here. Can I come into the gates, for example, because the padlock that is used is weak and I can break it. So you are now trying to break into what you have been able to discover to have vulnerability. We will also talk about web application basics, We looked at what are the architecture of web application, because we looked at one particular common framework that we used a lot, and that is the OWASP standard. And that will help us to see, oh, what really are we looking for, especially what are the top vulnerabilities that we are looking for anytime we looked at the web application. So we'll talk about that. For the vulnerability assessment, we'll likely use this a lot during our next module, because we will see how we can use some few scanning tools like Nexus Pro and OpenVAS to be able to perform some few vulnerability and conduct it. And at the end, we may also have reports on some of the vulnerability assessments that we have conducted. We'll see how we can interpret some of the reports. Some of these tools, they are free. Some you have to pay for it. So we'll be able to see the few ones that we can use during our practical section. I'd see how best could we gather enough vulnerability from these tools, and how can we also analyze or interpret any of the results in which we get from that. So we move straight to the basic of exploitation. And I have said initially that exploitation is you identify vulnerability, you now want to gain unauthorized access to this vulnerability, to the system, based on the vulnerability that you have seen or you have identified. And this exploitation phase in ethical hacking, it's really an approach, is a systemic approach, is a techniques, and in some cases, it doesn't mean that it's just going to go straight like that. You may probably have to use different techniques to be able to get into the exploitation states. And in some cases, while you are trying to make use of your exploitation, some system becomes much harder for you to gain access. You may also have to look at, oh, what other techniques can I use at this time? What other methods can I use at this time? So it's not just a one-step way. At times, you may get it straightforward. At times, it may not be that easy for you to get. So we said the exploitation phase in ethical hacking is a very critical stage. So I've said vulnerability has been identified during some of the previous phase, and now you are now leveraging on those vulnerabilities so that you can gain a full control over the application, over the system, over the network. And remember, when we are performing this, or when we will do some few exercises on this, we will be mimicking like a real world scenario. And that means that we are not going to start exploiting applications that we do not have access to, or we do not have an authorization for. So, but what we are going to discover from it at the end of the day will help us to see how we can improve on the security posture of an organization, how we can also leverage what we have done so far to improve the security of the organization. We call something defense in depth, and it simply means that you have different layers of security. So your organization, for example, that you are trying to protect might have had some few security in place, maybe some few security practice, but it might be possible that after you concluded your exploitation, you are able to still gain access to the network, the application, or the system where you should not gain access. So you now want to see ways in which you can harden those security once more, where you can put another layer in place to ensure that your security has been well fortified than how it was before. So your exploitation in the sense of ethical hacking, it's not a bad thing at all. Rather, it's just help you to be sure that you are doing the right thing at the right time. because any of the sensitive information that you're able to gain access to, that you're able to exploit, might give an attacker a leverage the next time when the attacker is coming in. But because you have been able to do that much earlier for your organization, when you have the authorization to do that, the next thing you just be thinking of is that, okay, so a black hacker will be able to have this access. What next can I do to ensure that this access will not will be prevented? We will discuss also things in which can be done, but just remember that the major reason for exploitation is you've identified those weaknesses, you have been able to, you want to try to see if you can be able to gain unauthorized access. And at the end of the day, your goal is to harden or to add another security or another layer of security into your organization network, into your organization system, so that this exploitation or this weakness will not be exploited again. Then, the objective of exploitation in ethical hacking are primarily focused on validating vulnerability and understanding what their impact is on the system. You may have to have different impact level in an organization. So let's say we have different skills in which you look at different risks that might likely crystallize in your organization. And when those vulnerability has been exploited, you have a threat in place. But if you now try to identify which of these are the biggest threats that the organization has, what you will now focus on is try as much as possible to find a very good way to minimize the impact of those threats in your organization. There may be some that you will look and said, well, I really don't think I care about this part. Let it go. While you have discovered some and said, oh, this seems to be very severe, I would really try to work on it as fast as possible. So that is where your vulnerability validation comes in. So you want to first confirm that is there a vulnerability that I have discovered doing some of my previous testing techniques? Is that vulnerability, is it very severe? If you see it to be very severe, you can be sure that if a non-ethical hacker should be able to exploit that, it is going to be a real issue. But at the same time, you also just don't want to say, oh, I have done my scanning, I have detected that I have a vulnerability, and then I want to spend XYZ billions of dollars or naira to be able to protect this. Instead of you doing that at that moment, you may have done some of your exploitation and say that, okay, I'm putting this in a contained environment. Let me exploit this. And by the time you exploit it, you just discover that, oh, this is not really a major issue. Or what the result of our exploitation is showing you is that, oh, this is a false positive. That means that it is not really, it looks like it's going to really be a major vulnerability, but after testing it, after exploiting, you discover that, oh, no, it is really not. So it is because of the exploitation in which we have done that will give you the confidence to tell your organization that, oh, we really don't think that we need to do anything about this. I think it's better that we just leave it or let it be. So that is your vulnerability validation. You are trying to ensure that whatever vulnerability results that has come out while you are performing your vulnerability testing, you want to exploit it to be sure that they are real vulnerability. If you discover that they are not real vulnerability, then you save yourself a lot of headache, you save yourself money, you save your organization a lot of resources with that. So you are validating the vulnerability to be sure that if they are real or they are not. Because at times, some tools that you use might just give a false image. So you just want to be sure that you are getting the right vulnerability. Also, one of the objectives, as I previously said, it will help you to also know the potential risks that is associated with any of the system. So because you have been able to see the potential risks, it will help the stakeholder to make decisions. So they may have looked at it and said, oh, from this exploration in which we have done, we have been able to gain access to critical system. And they also know that the moment in which you gain access to critical system, it can cause a total shutdown or disruption in operation. And because the stakeholder knows what this might mean to their business. Remember when we are talking about the CIA triad, which you have learned in your previous module, one of what you learned there is availability. So if a company, whenever a company exists, the company really don't want to shut down at any time. And if the company has a reason to shut down, they really want to come back online as soon as possible. So let's give an example. Let's say you are a financial service, you render financial service to people. And each time in which a customer needs to log in on the application and make transfer, after like maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes, the recipient has already confirmed that, yes, I have received the funds. But imagine when you make a transfer and the recipient said, sorry, I have not received this. And then you check back on your app and you see that it's still rolling on your app, so to say, the process has not been fully completed. And the next thing you hear from your bank is, sorry, we have a little downtime. You wait for a little while, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, they still have that same issue. It gives you a very major concern because especially if the transaction you need to do is an urgent one, which in most cases, we do transactions that are quite a bit urgent. And you now felt that, oh, maybe I can use another bank at this particular moment. Probably you have 2, 3 other banks in which you can use. You have to go to the next bank, make use of it, and within the next few seconds, the recipients inform you that, yes, I've received it, the one you sent from this other bank. Now, if that happens to you today, you try it again with that first bank again, the same thing happened. Then 2, 3 other people also make similar complaint about it. What that means to the stakeholder is that they will look at it that, oh, we have a major issue and this is unreliable. Now, some of the profits in which we have made over the past few hours, the past few days, we could not make any of those profits because we could not have most of our transaction completed on time. So because you have done an exploitation in the first instance and you have identified that, oh, there's a particular vulnerability in configuration that you have seen in the system, and that is what is causing this. Decision maker will be very quick to say, oh, this is really affecting our business, and therefore we need to ensure that this is done immediately on time as fast as possible. So that will help you to understand that your exploitation in which you are doing might be a life-saving techniques for the organization as a whole, because you are able to really see a major risk that has been identified, and you have also shared that to the decision maker. It will make them to be able to give a very fast and considerable action within the few moments. So we also talked about the defense strategy development. And in this defense strategy development, what we are looking at, when I give an example of defense layer, what we are simply trying to look at is A vulnerability has been detected which can be exploited. Therefore, your organization needs to put in more security in place. So, while you already have a security system in place before, you discover over the next few years that the hackers have really gone much advanced, and the security system in which you have in place can't do this alone. You have to have another layer. So that is where defense strategy development really comes in. So you are designing, you are imputing, you are deploying additional control over what you already have before. You are hardening your configuration of the system in which you have before. You are making it much harder, much tougher to penetrate. And you can be able to get this done. You will be able to get this done due to the fact that you have already performed an exploitation in the first instance. So in overall, exploitation is not about causing harm to your organization, but is more of identifying weaknesses and trying to also find the best results to tackle this. So this will help your organization to be able to provide necessary security control or additional security control when needed in your organization. Let's look at what are the techniques and tools. Or before then, okay, we still have prioritization and remediation, please. And under this prioritization and remediation, what has been discussed back is which one should you fix first? Which one should you leave for the later? Which one is critical for you to remediate right now? So is decision that the decision maker will need to really make by then. Senior management makes those decisions in the organization to see. You have been able to tell us that these are the critical things that really need to be fixed. Then your decision maker, they will have to sit down, look at it, and said, all right, let's remediate this first. Let's prioritize this first because the severity is very high. If the severity is low, you may decide and said, oh, okay, we probably might leave this till some other time. And at times, there may be different ways in which you also remediate some of this vulnerability that has been discovered. At times, it might just be, oh, you call a third-party vendor, for example, and said, do you have tools in which you can use for this to help us secure our system against this? And they might come in, you may just buy some few other tools. Or you might say, oh, this service that is causing this, is there a way in which we can also add additional layer of security or a monitoring process in place? That might also be one other thing that can be considered. It may also help you when you have done a very good exploitation. It can also help you to give a better training when it comes to security awareness to the organization. Because this training will help the organization to probably identify that we fall into this particular attack or this particular vulnerability because somebody exposed XYZ credential, and that might come in form of social engineering. So maybe it has been discovered that a lot of people who are not authorized are able to gain access to some critical applications. And after some of your research, after brainstorming, you discover that somebody has performed a social engineering on one of the employee in the organization. And because there was a successful social engineering techniques that has been performed, they were able to gain access into the system. That reminds me of a social engineering techniques that was being performed a few couple of years ago. And it was just to show how vulnerable humans can really be at times. So that particular day, it was said that maybe it was said to be referred to a password security day, for example. So let's say it's a password security day. that is being observed, and someone come to you and said, oh, I understand that, I really don't know if you know that today is a password security day. And what we are trying to let people know is you should not tell anyone your password. You should keep a safe password, and you should also make your password very complex. So the interviewer was asking whoever he was interviewing that, okay, you are likely to also have a very strong password, I believe so. And the person responded, I said, yes, I have a strong password. He said, oh, that's great. And at times, and the person just said, oh, it's likely that your password might even contain maybe your date of birth and so, or your pet's name, or maybe where you lived, or your grandmother's maiden name. It just paint different scenario to that person. And the person said, yeah, well, yeah, I tried to make it more secure. I put in my date of birth and some few other of my pet's name to make it more secure. And the interviewer just said, oh, okay. I would like to send you maybe a birthday gift later on. What particular day of the year are you really born? And maybe the person said, oh, I was born on a Wednesday, on the 20th of April. And so he said, oh, that's nice. And the person continued to said, oh, is it likely that you were born maybe after the Second World War? So yeah, I was born after the Second World War. In fact, I was born maybe 5 years after Nigeria independence, for example. And he said, oh, Nigeria independence? Oh, the Nigeria independence, of course, 1960. Oh, yeah, just 5 years after that. So automatically, you're able to get that this person was born in maybe 1965, for example. He has given you the date of birth, and probably you want to find out about, oh, what's likely the pet's name. And you said, and I think you're a very good lover of dog. He said, yeah, yeah, my dog at home. And maybe the person just mentioned the names of the dog at home and said, it's a very nice. You have been able to gather some information. And those information like that, which is mostly used in social engineering, could later be used to gather what your password is, and then use it to attack your organization. And because some might not really have different password being used in different places. They may have the same password used in their social media accounts, same password used in their organization emails, and so when one is being exposed, it's possible that who the attacker might use that means to also be able to get information to the other credentials that are being needed. So majorly, what we are saying here is your exploitation, what you have discovered, the vulnerability you have discovered might be a means in which you can also train your organization so that they could be aware of um, different techniques that attacker can use in the organization. And that is one other very good advantage of that. So what are the techniques and tools that are used for exploitation? Now, when we talk about techniques and tools that are being used, when we are having the next module, we are going to see an example of how this framework, for example, is used, which is Metasploit. And we call this framework because even though it's a tool, but it goes through different steps before you could be able to finally achieve your objectives. So you will see how Metasploit framework could really be very helpful when it comes to exploitation. In fact, it has been used over over few couples of years to ensure or to show very well that most of the vulnerability can be well exploited. So we looked at some few vulnerability during our next module and see how we can gain access to maybe a system with it. So it's one of the reasons why I said ensure you have your Kali Linux downloaded, and then we'll see how we can make use of this exploitation during that time. There's also a technique which is payload development. So what payload development simply talks about is you have a software in which you customize, or you have a code in which you have customized, and after you've crafted this code, you send it out. And by the time you send it out, either through a virus, through a worm, then any moment in which it's been executed, it gives you the necessary exploits in which you need. So you can design some of those payload, and some payload or some of those scripts, they can even be gotten online. They can be gotten from some of the automated tools themselves. And when you get it, you know what it's being used for, you know its purpose. You can send it across, and whenever it's being sent to a network, for example, it could be able to exploit a lot of information that you may not even be aware of. And at the end of the day, what your exploit is trying to do is it just wants to gain access. It was not authorized to gain the access, but because you have customized a code, you have customized a script, and that script is running either underground without you knowing, you'll be able to see, oh, this is what it can do. Sometimes some of those payload can totally shut down your system. Some, they are just meant to monitor what is happening on your network or your system. Imagine a payload that has been crafted, and the payload says that even when at your side, your webcam camera is not coming up, someone should be able to, because the payload has been injected into your system, someone should be able to activate the camera without you being aware of that. You may have seen some movie where some will just find maybe a sticker to cover their webcam so that no one can see. And it's because they have been able to see that some exploit really exists in today's world, where you do not necessarily have to put on your camera before someone could have access to it. So we'll try to demonstrate how those exploits really work while we are doing some of the practical section. Then there are some post-exploitation activities. So after you have gained those approval, what are the things in which you can do? Is it that you want to compromise credentials? Is it that you want to gain administrative control over a system? I'll give a typical example. While coming here to discuss on this topic, one of the things in which I requested for is that I want my access, my privilege to be modified. So, which means that give me a little higher privilege so that I can share a slide. Because this particular privilege is given to an administrator, so to say, I will not be able to do that if I do not have an administrative privilege. Now, what an administrator will do is that the administrator will add me to maybe a co-host, for example, and that means he has elevated my privilege level. And because of that, I will be able to share, do some other things. I can also kick out someone else from the discussion. Now, if you have like a payload, for example, that you have sent over, and I can have a disruption, I can have a control as an administrator without the administrator giving me that control, then I could do what I need to do myself. I can elevate my privilege myself at the moment. It's also the same thing that happens when an unauthorized user is able to have is able to exploit a network, he might gain an administrative access. The administrative access that this person gain can help him to do a lot of things. Imagine in your organization, you use a particular applications for give an example, maybe for your supply chain. Whenever you need to request for goods and service from a vendor, that is what you use. You use the application. You will not be given access to that application if you have not been authorized to do that. Now, because I have been able to exploit some weakness in that application, for example, I have been able to gain other privilege on that application. Now, the other privilege that I've been able to gain is I gain an administrative access, for example. And this administrative access enables me to create a user, give the user different roles, responsibility. What will I do? I can say, okay, this privilege in which I have as an administrator, I'm going to create an account or a user called ABC on that application. Then you created, because you're an administrator, you are like a super user. You have that elevated privilege. Then you created another user that is called ABC. And you said this user should be an initiator of a request. Then you created another user, XYZ, and said this user should be an authorizer of a request. Remember, you are the same person who controls the ABC and also the same person who controls the XYZ. Now, we are talking about a supply chain. Most time, what some organization will do is, or in most cases in organization, which is best practice, it must always be different person who initiates those requests. It must be different from who authorized the request. So there is what we call like segregation of duty. But because you have made yourself an administrator, you could be able to say, now I'm creating somebody who is going to be an initiator and I'm creating somebody who is going to be an authorizer. It is still the same you that is doing these two. So there's no segregation of duty in the sense that it is the same person who is doing it. Then, as an initiator, you initiate a request and said, this company needs you to supply this, maybe this particular goods, this particular service that might worth thousands of naira, thousands of dollars to the organization. And you now put a notice there. Please supply it to this address because we will be needing it in our new office. Then the request will go to someone to authorize. And when the authorizer looked at it, if it's a genuine authorizer, for example, who is the system, would have said, oh, I don't know about this request. But because you have also created an authorizer, the workflow comes to you. He said, yeah, I'm an authorizer. I know what I have done. I'm also the one that will authorize it. So then you said, boom, I authorize, boom. Then the vendor will just see it and said, okay, this person has requested for this person has requested for this. Sometimes it might be that maybe the agreement you have with the company is deliver. After you have delivered, we'll pay. So there may even not be any need for the money to get to the company that's going to deliver that service first. So you went ahead and processed it. The company received it. They received the request. It has been authorized by this person, blah, blah, blah. And then, boom, the next thing you can do is, deliver. And when it's delivered, the company is waiting for the payments to be done. Because you are an administrator also, what you have done is you just delete those accounts that has performed those actions. The goods have been delivered already, you delete the account. So after 1 month, the vendor couldn't receive their payment. What's going on? This company doesn't behave like this. Why is it taking so long? So they had to send a message and say, we've delivered this to you, but we've not gotten our payment. Then the company looked at it and said, this delivered? Who asked for this? Then they start checking and they saw that, oh, who is this user who requested for this? We don't know this user. And after finding out, they see in the mail trail that this user is not even in the system. So how did this happen? What what I'm just painting here is for you to see that there are different activities that can be performed whenever an access is being granted or a privilege is being escalated during the exploitation phase. A lot can really happen. It might not even, the user might not even need to even create another account because he has a very high privilege. He can even reset, for example, one of the accounts that are already in place. Reset. When he resets, he puts in the new password, he uses it. He reset for the authorizer to he reuse it, and so. And at the end of the day, he has performed a very wonderful work, so to say. So let's know that some techniques like this really exist. It has been used over the years. Some still find a way to still use it because some are also not aware of how this is being done. It might also be very difficult for them to know how they could also be able to find or to put a control into this. So your work out there is understand how these techniques works, see how you can also protect your organization with this. So, but looking at exploitation, are there really some risks and challenges to it? Yes, there are risks and challenges to it. One of the risks is that there may be an impact on the target system. So you want to perform an exploitation. Exploitation sometimes that you are performing, it's not always, as I said, this thing doesn't, it's not just that you send a command and you just get the access once, boom. It doesn't occur like that in most cases. You may have to pass through different processes. Yeah, you have to do different techniques. There are times in which you may have some security in place, which blocks part of the techniques that you have used, some of the tools that you have used before. You may be looking for another advanced tools that could be able to do this. And doing most of those things, you are doing it on the system in your organization. So there may be a downtime. Your service might be impacted at that time. You may not be able to gain necessary service. Customers might not be able to have access to their information at that time when those are being done. So you may also, at the end of the day, lose some data in your organization because of this. So that's why there must always be a need for careful planning and coordination. In fact, the reality is that most time when vulnerability operation testing is being performed, it's best performed when it is not a very high business hour. Or rather, it may be performed, let's say your organization doesn't open to customer on weekend. It may be a very good time to perform it because you have less disruption to your services at that time since you are not working. But if your organization works 24/7 on the clock, it may really, really, really need a very good coordination to ensure that a total planning in place to ensure that you don't have a very long system disruption. At times, you may perform some of these things and you discover that the system disruption is taking too long and you may have to revert back. And if you do not have a good planning in place, you may not be able to revert back immediately. So there's a need for having very good coordinations when necessary, because there may be a major impact on the target system and you may have a very long hours of service downtime. There may also be a risk of detection and response. So what this simply means is that there may be some, you may have some tools, you may have some detecting mechanism. It may be like your IDS, which is your intrusion detection system, might have flagged something and said, oh, this thing should not go through, or this particular action should not go through. But you are trying as much as possible to say, okay, instead of this particular system flagging it, is there a means in which you can also circumvent what is being done so that it can give you access as best as possible? So remember, you may have a system in place which will help you to detect and respond to some of this um, particular exploitation. At the same time, you may also want to tweak some of those tools so that they can allow some of this process to also take place, or some of this activity to take place. Some organization might say, okay, let's see if when we tweak this, maybe it's going to allow this, or is it just going to flag, raise a bell, raise alarm without giving us a real scenario of what really happens? So there may be a risk of that alone. There may also be a risk whereby, which is a major one sometimes in which we can also face, is you may crash a whole system at the time in which you are doing your exploitation. Yet, we have different payloads that you may deploy. Those payloads might be too heavy for the system to bear, and the system crash totally. So imagine you crash your system, maybe you crash your server while you are trying to do an exploitation, because maybe what the server is processing at that time seems to be too overwhelming and it's crashed. That may pose a very big risk, because for you to bring that up again, it can take you a lot of resources, time, effort, and so those might be the risks in which you might face when you want to perform your exploitation. So it's good to just be aware of some of those risks in which you will face. Now, let's look at the overview of web application architecture. So when we talk about web application, what really do we really mean? We are talking about how your web interface is being designed, your software is being designed, how do they interact with one another, what technology are they built on. You may have, for example, a website as an example, and in that website, part of what it does is you can go in there, you can log in as a user, and you can make purchase, you can make an order at different times, or it can even be like maybe some of the communication platform in which is being used, maybe globally. It might be like Zoom, Teams. How do they interact with one another? How do you log in? How do you sign in? How do they deliver the necessary service? So you may have a web application in which when you design it, there may be a section in which a form, you may have to fill a form. How do they interact with you? How do you get a response back that, oh, your form has been delivered, your message has been actioned, and so this is what the architecture of web application really entails. You look at how do they interact? How was the design really done? Is there any component of the design that can really go wrong? Now, the components of a web application really comes in two major ways. There is the one that you see, and there is the one that you may not see as a user. So the one that you see, it's called the client side. So for the client side, most time it is the user interface. How is the design? How is the visual of the application? You have an application that it may be, I always like using banking, for example, because the interface for banking, you have both the two sides, both the client side, and you may also have the back end side of it. So for the client side of maybe a banking application or a banking website, you will first see like a visual, maybe the landing page. And that is what a presentation layout of the application looks like. It may show you that, oh, this is how the browser is. This is where you need to key in some information. This is the visuals. It has this logo in here. There's a column where you can sign in your credential to be able to access it, to be able to log in. There is one whereby if the password is wrong, it will also give you a notification immediately. And so those are the client side, the user interface. But there's also a logic behind. So part of the logic might involve information in which you impute in the front end of the application, how those information are being handled. For example, you need to put in your username and password. While you are putting in those username and password, in case you put in a wrong password, for example, how is it being validated that, oh, this is the right password, this is the wrong password? So it's what you can also see on the front end. It can display it back to you and said, sorry, what I'm trying to process, this logic I'm trying to process is not right at this moment because you are not giving me the required information or the necessary information that I need at this moment. There may also be the other side of it, which is the back end, and we call that most time the server side. This back end, it can be like your web server, which is like a software. This one responds to whatever the clients send, just to ensure that the information are well processed. You may also have your application server. The informations that you have imputed, your username, for example, and your password, different information in which you have imputed. You want to make a transfer, you have imputed the different things, the amounts, the dates in which the transfer should go, the narration. How do they communicate? Your application servers will help you to see how these are being executed. Then you also have your database. All those informations, when they are being processed, they are always stored and managed somewhere. So if anybody have access to where they are being stored or could be able to tamper with what is being done in the database, there will be a lot of issue. So you must be able to also know this as a major component of your web application architecture. So remember your web application architecture, you have your front end and you have your back end. So from your front end, majorly it is what you can see as a user. The back end, majorly as a technician, when you have higher privilege, for example, you will be able to see that. It is like, this is like an iceberg, for example, in an ocean. While you may be able to see a top layer of the iceberg, there may also be an other layer down there that you may not be able to see. And in most cases, the layers that you may not be able to see are very much bigger than the layer that you can see. So just an example to just show you that, yeah, any interaction in which you make online on any web applications, it always have two different sides. There is the one that you can see, and there is another one that the technician, the IT guys in the organization could be able to see, to process, to manipulate, or to do some other things on. Why do we really talk about these two things? Is because any time in which an attack needs to occur, it's always looked at the architecture of the application. to know where should this be focused on. There are some architecture in which just only the front side might give you more information that you need, or you may even be able to pull out a lot of information from the front side. While at some other time, it may be the back end that you really need to get some information. So that is why it's compulsory to know those two. There's also one component of web application architecture that talks about communication protocol. This simply means that you have your client side, you have your front end, you have your back end. How do they all communicate together? How do messages is being sent from one part to another? So that's where you talk much about your HTTP and HTTPS, your hypertext markup protocol, transfer protocol, both the secure one and the unsecure one. How do they communicate over the web? How they send information across? You may also have your API too, your application programming interface, whereby you deal with how do I send a message or pass an information from this particular user to this particular user. Most time we use the example of a chef here and a kitchen, so or a restaurant, to maybe give better understanding of API. So imagine you are sitting in a restaurant, for example, and on that restaurant, you're on your table, you want to order a meal. What you are going to do is maybe a waiter will come and said, get your order. He said, okay, I need XYZ and I need these pieces of other parts to be added to my meal. And so what the waiter is going to do is he's going to send your request, take your request, you already got your order, take those your order, and then send it to the kitchen. Then the chef will look at your order and said, okay, this person wants me to produce this, and he will get it done. After I produced it, the waiter will come back, looked at it, check, oh, you asked me to get this. Okay, these are what this customer requested for. I have this. Carries this food and give it to you on your table. So you will know that there's an interaction between the customer and also the chef. While the customer is not directly interfacing with the chef, there is like a middleman in between who is helping to transfer those information from one another, who is helping to communicate those information from one place to another. And that's majorly the work in which the API will do. So your application, we always have an interface for communication. So that is what responsibility. So your API serves like that waiter who is helping you to communicate and take in your information from one place to another. Now, this is one very interesting and very good part. We talk about the OWASP top 10. You may have heard of this before, and this is actually a project. This project has been ongoing for a little while now. The OWASP really stands for Open Worldwide Application Security Project. And what this does is they'll give a list of top 10 major important topics in the field of cybersecurity that involves web application development. It will also let you to see what are the security assessments that have been done on this. So this is what we initially discussed about web application. Now, are there any major security threats that have been seen over the years with web application? Yes. For you, if you let's assume that you don't even know what to do or what to check on a web application. You may probably be jumping from one part to the other, and you may not be able to have any major breakthrough because you really don't have the best procedure and processes in place. But in OWASP Substance, what they have done is they have analyzed well-known vulnerability, the critical ones that your web application can face. Then they rank it to this is the highest, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and they did that up to 10. If there is a change over the years, they will also update some of these documents. The last one that was updated is the 2021 top 10. And we'll discuss about the 10 major critical security risks that is being faced in the web application, which OWASP top 10 has delivered. Maybe by when we're having the next class, I may likely go through the OWASP top 10 with you once more, or if you can take it as maybe to challenge yourself, read more about OWASP top 10. What you will discover in OWASP top 10 is that when those documents are being produced, those documents will list those top major or most critical security risks that web application face. They will provide also the remediation for that. So when you test some of this in your organization, you will see scenarios in which you can use to test it also in those documents. When you test some of this in your organization and you discover that, oh, this vulnerability really exists, you will also see what you can do for those vulnerability. And that is what OWASP top 10 has done so far. So let's go through the top 10. The first on the list is the broken access control. This is the major or the most critical part in the OWASP top 10. And what does broken access control mean? It simply means that you are not an authorized person to gain access to this information in the system, but you have been able to gain access. So that means that there's a broken access control. Access is supposed to be control. Access in which you have to an organization system, to a web application, for example, must be based on your responsibility, your roles, your rights at that moment. Now, if you are not authorized, you have not been given the permission, and you are able to gain that, then what has happened is that you have broken the control, the access control that is supposed to be in place. So OWASP classified this as a top major risk that it's being faced in a web application. Then if we look at the document, it will give you a scenario of how this is done and to also give you what you need to do. But the major part in which, in most cases, that will always be recommended for broken access control is that ensure that the settings, the parameter authentication method that is in the web application should be well implemented, and it should not be weak. So if we look at access control, for example, we say access control is a weakness. You are given access when you are not supposed to give access. Is there a way in which you can identify the permission settings that is in place on that application? Does it allow just anyone to just gain that access? Has it been ensured that the control is not a weak one at that moment? So this happens to be one of the major risks that is being faced in web application. Someone who should not have authorization, who should not have an access, do have an access to an application. Whenever that occurs, that means you are looking at the number one major risk in OWASP top 10. Then the second one is cryptographic failure. So in cryptographic, we are talking majorly about how do we encrypt an information? how do you ensure that some keys are well hard-coded? Now, because some informations, some encryptions are a bit weak, maybe the algorithm that is being used is weak, and so it may not be possible sometimes for you to be able to have a very secure encryption. And whenever you have a weak encryption, that is where you have your cryptographic failure. And that's the second highest OWASP top 10 risk that we have. What is the best way to counter this? Just ensure that you have a very good or a very strong encryption in place. And the ways in which those encryptions key could be decrypted should also be well managed so that individuals who should not have access to the key is having the access to the key. If that occurs, it brings a total failure on the encryption method in which you have put in place. So the first one, as I said, is broken access control. And the second top 10 is cryptographic failure, which is your encryption. The third one is injection. So what does this mean? Anytime in which, so remember the CIA triad. Always remember that most of what we discuss in cybersecurity, we always refer back to the CIA triad. And here we are talking about inserting malicious code into user's input or data query. When that happens, you remember in the CIA triad, we talk about integrity. If there is a manipulation in whatever information in which you are supposed to get, it has been distorted, then it's likely that, or in most cases, someone has tampered into the data queries. They have imputed something else to change the format of that data query. And that's what injection really talks about. So the moment in which attacker could be able to have access to the system and inject a malicious code, and that malicious code could be able to manipulate whatever data that you have in your query, then you have an injection in place. And this normally happens in the database management, because you have most of your queries in your database. So when somebody executes some queries and then manipulates the data that you have, information that will be going out after that will have been distorted also. So this is the third major risk that is in the OWASP top 10 category. The fourth one is insecure design. When we talked about our user interface, UI, in our front end, there may be some flaws when those designs were being made. So those flaws in design might lead to issue of security compromise. And whenever that happens, then it means that an attacker could be able to have access to the system because there has been a flaw in the design of that web application. So whenever those kind of design flaws is being noted, there may be a need to go back to how this design was being made in the first instance, review it, and put a proper control in place. You will be seeing a phrase coming out, VAPT. What we are doing here, or what we meant by that, is you are doing a vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. What that simply shows is you have performed a test to check the vulnerability in that system. You have also been able to do a penetration of that system to test if they can really stand the test of time. And when you perform those VAPT, it can give you a lot of exposure. It can give you a lot of issues in which your system might be facing at that time. And in any case, in any way in which you looked at your OWASP top 10, you can, it may just be a vulnerability assessment that you performed, and on your application, and it can flag, or the result can come out with some of this issue. When we when we'll be performing it in our practical exercise, when we do a vulnerability assessment and we see the results, we'll try to see if we can identify some of those that are linked to OWASP substance in it. Then another one is the security misconfiguration. So what are the settings that is in place? Are those settings, are they the right settings? Are they weak? Are they securely configured? If there is an issue with the configuration of security settings, then an attacker can leverage on that at any moment. So it's also a very major risk in the OWASP top 10. And this is risk top level number 5. So whenever security settings on applications are not well configured or they are not configured securely, you have a security misconfiguration. And when you perform your VAPT, it can help you to identify those misconfigurations and see if you can secure your system much better. We also have the vulnerable and outdated component. So you have a software that has a vulnerability. You did not update this, or even the organization that has released that particular system or software has not done an update of it. It's possible that this can be detected whenever you are performing a vulnerability assessment. And when you discover that, oh, this system is outdated, there will always be a need to prompt you that ensure you do an update on this, because it's outdated because in some cases, a vulnerability has been discovered in it and you have to patch it, you have to update it, you have to give you have to mitigate any of the risks that this can cause. If you do not have a patch for it immediately, so to say, you must ensure that it's well monitored so that if any critical things comes in, because you are having a continuous monitoring in place, you can quickly be able to detect it. So there's a need to know that when an outdated component occur, it can also lead to a major risk, and it's one of the top 10 in the list of OWASP. The top 7 is identification and authentication failure. And we talk about identification when you put in your credential, your username, password. But if somebody can bypass this process, your login process, because you have poor password in place, for example, then it shows that there's a weakness in place. So if there's a weak authentication mechanism in place, then there will be a major issues. And that is the 7th list of OWASP substance. The 8th of it is software and data integrity failure. Can your data be modified? Can an attacker tamper into your system? If that can occur, if data manipulation can occur, then that means that data integrity is at stake. At times, some of these OWASP substance, they have a little linkage between one another. Remember the broken web access that we talked about in number 1? It to some extent, it can also relate to your authentication failure at times. Remember the injection in which we talked about, it can also relate to your software and data integrity failure that we are talking about in number 8 here. So there may be some few linkage between some of them, but OWASP has classified it in different, maybe in a more specified way. And if you go through the OWASP document itself, you will see how they were able to really classify it, what you can do to mitigate any of those risks. It also helps you to also see scenarios in which those things can also occur, how best you can test it. They were well stated there. The number 9 on the list is security logging and monitoring failure. Now, why is this a concern? Anytime in which you design a system, an application, there must always be a way in which you have a log of whatever happened on the application and monitor the log. So logging is more like a register, so to say. You do any activity, you just check in on that register. Okay, this is what I have done today. At 5 a.m., I log into this application. At 5:20, I make a transfer. So it's like your bank statement, for example. Your bank statement will contain narration of activities that occurs on your account during a particular period. So it takes a log of it. If you also see some application in your bank statement, it can also help you to know what have you done in the past, maybe 1 hour, in the past 1 month. Some application will tell you, you log in on this date, the last time, at this time. It can even tell you the system in which you logged in and the location of that system at that time. That is, there's a login in place, there's a monitoring in place. But if you do not have adequate logging and monitoring practice, it means that if any activities occur, you may not even be able to detect it. So a typical example is you are trying to log in into an application and let's say the application we are talking about in your organization always monitor the time in which you log in, your location in which you log in. Now, it gives you all those information, but you monitor it. And anytime you monitor it, you see, okay, this person logs in today, he logs in at 5 p.m., he logs in at this. But if there's a pattern that changed, for example, and said there's a user who log in, and this user is logging in from maybe San Francisco, for example, and you are looking at it, oh no, San Francisco, how come? I'm here in Nigeria, how come is logging in from San Francisco? Well, it may be a suspicious activity that is ongoing, and you will be able to detect that if you have a login and a monitoring system in place. But if you have a failure of that, then it may be a major issue that you need to really assess. So an effective logging and monitoring mechanism will help to give you visibility of what happened to your system at any point in time. And that has been detected to be the number 9th major risk that is in the OWASP top 10. While the last one is server-side request forgery. So in this particular part, you have your server in place. This server is hosting a lot of information. The server will also help you to say, okay, this is what's next to be done. This information needs to be passed from XYZ. Now, it gives the command that please do this. I need to get this from here. The server is going to make the request. But if an attacker now ensure that is tricking that server to do something else that is not asked to do, that will be a major weakness also. So an attacker is looking at, oh, this server can give me this information, but I really want this server to give me another information. Then it makes it very difficult to be able to know that is this information coming from the authorized person or not. So whenever there is a failure in the requests that is being made by your server, you may need to watch out for a server-side request forgery, SSRF, and that is the 10th one. Okay, so that should have been the little n, but let's discuss about some few terminologies also in cybersecurity. And this few terminology will help us to also understand better what some few things that we have discussed or we have talked about, or which we hear will also mean. So, authentication first. Here, we talk about authentication when we need to identify who the real user that is making or request for an access should be. How do I know that I, Rotimi, for example, should be the one who should make this request? How does the system knows that I am the one that this information should be given to, or this access should be given to? One of what I may need to do is to authenticate or identify myself. How will I identify myself? I will be able to identify myself if I have already told the system that anytime you see this username imputed, this person must identify himself by a password or by a fingerprint or by an eye scan. Sometimes it may also be a combination of more of that. So authentication is majorly identification procedure. Look at your phone, for example. Some, whenever they need to open up their phone, they may have to put it through their eyes. I know my phone, for example, that at times I may use different authentication method for it. Sometimes it may be my eyes, and sometimes it may be my finger. But I have seen at times whereby I may input my fingers, maybe on my phone or on my system, and I discover that it doesn't recognize my finger at that moment. Reason might be that maybe my finger is wet at that time, so it couldn't really recognize because of the moisture there at that time. I may want to clean it and it still doesn't recognize immediately. Or it may even be the surface in which you also impute this finger that is already dirty, so it doesn't recognize it as fast as possible. So because of that, I may want to opt in for and said, okay, let me bypass this, let me use my password, and you just input the password. And at times, immediately your system sees your face, it will just open up because it just see that it's you. So it's just to ensure that you are being identified. There are majorly things in which you know yourself, or things in which, or what you are as a person. Those are the identification mechanism. There's also one other terminology that we use, which is botnet. When you hear the word botnet, what comes into your mind? We are talking majorly about bots. It's from robots, and net is from network. So there is a coordinated network that is in place whereby a particular system can send an information to different other systems which act like bots. The major system that send the information will be the master, the boat master. And it now has soldiers in the field that it can give commands to. Those soldiers are networked in such a way that they can easily communicate with each other. Whenever you have like an infected system in this way, for example, that have maybe a system has been infected with virus, and there can always be communication channels across those different systems, then you have a botnet in place. And when you see like what we call DDoS, distributed denial of service, it can be that a boat master has given a command to the boat and said, at this particular time, you all should shut down this system, or you all should just continue to send so many requests to this server at a particular time. So you can have a system or you can have a server in place. And then, imagine you have a server, and that server knows that if you want to process an information, it will take maybe, it needs to process the customer information. It knows that At every 1 second, one customer sending an information. So it quickly processes in 1 second. But now imagine a situation whereby in that 1 second, 1 billion system or user send an information. It will be totally messed up and it can even crash or shut down. So what bot also does is that you can create millions of it, send so many information to one server at a time. And at the end, the server will just be totally weak or dead and will not be able to give any output out. Then, whenever a legitimate customer even wants to go in, we just say that, oh, your web application is not up. What's happening? It is likely because someone has been sending consistent information which are unnecessary and it's too hard for the server to process that the server itself even shuts down. That can be performed by a botnet. There's another one which may be a terminology, which is a domain. Anytime you hear about a domain, what it's just saying is that there's one major entity that's comprised of different computers or different computer-related peripheral. So, like an entity that has your router, has your printer, has series of computer, and you can always control. So, if you have like a domain, it's like a parent who has different child under it. The moment in which the parent gives an instruction, the instruction can be passed along to any other ones in the network. You will also have a terminology like data breach. That means that someone has gained access into your network, gotten a lot of data, and exposed those data. Most time, it may be your password. You may have heard about the dark web. When you go to the dark web, or if you hear any information about the dark web, what normally occurs there is information that has been breached. It can be your personal identifiable information, it can be your password, some password in which you use. You may go to a site and you want to put in your password, for example, and they will say that your password is weak or your password has been exposed to a data breach. It is likely because you have used a password that has been harvested and it has been seen that, oh, these are the details that this person has. Sometimes these details can even be your credit card information, your social security number, and so many other things. Those are what data breach really are. Over the years, we've had numerous news about different data breach that occur. It can be in a company that keeps some information or that records some of your information, maybe your credit card numbers and information. And when a breach occurs, the hackers will just bring out everything in which you have on that particular from that particular server, send it to maybe like a marketplace, and they will tell anyone, if you're interested in buying any of these things, please come and buy. There may be like credit card number of millions of people that has been exposed. And because they have information to those millions of credit cards, they may want to sell it for a particular amount. Anyone who wants to buy it will buy it. They start using some credit cards. Some might even be password, and they'll just check, okay, I'm looking for this person. Is this person password? Is it exposed? And when it's exposed, especially in a data breach and it's in the dark web, someone might buy those data and start using it. So those are terminology that you will have, data breach like that. You can also have terminology like DDoS. I talk about this in both. Distributed denial of service. So someone has used different bots to send multiple informations to the extent in which the server has crashed. So you have a server that supplies information whenever a customer needs to make an inquiry. And after some time, it couldn't access the server again because it has crashed. And it may just be due to the fact that someone has already sent a distributed denial of service, it's always used by black hats. They really use this a lot. And some of these tools are being purchased for a very few tokens. And when they are being purchased, they're executed. When they're executed, they will have a target servers in which they want to execute it on. When it's being targeted, it can bring down that server, bombard it with so many requests that the server gets exhausted and just shut down. Then we have what we also call encryption. We also discussed this during the OWASP substep. So this is like a key. You have a key, you have an information, for example, and these are more in a logical way, not a physical key. They are more of a logical key. You have an information in which you want only one major person or some set of people to be able to see it. So you encrypt it. That means that you protect it and you lock the information, so to say. Then you must have find a way to send the key or find a way to tell whoever needs to open it that this is what you are going to open it with. This is how you open it. And when that person received it, which is the authorized person, he will use the key in which is available to open it. If any other person should see the information without the right key, he will not be able to open it. So encryption simply means that you are trying as much as possible to secure some information and send it to the right person at the right time. We talked a little about firewalls, and that should be in one of your previous modules. And here, it's just representing like a wall. It can either be a software or a hardware. What it's doing is like a protective mechanism. You cannot come in here, you cannot come in here. And whenever that firewall is in place, it means that there is a set of divine security that has been put in place so that no traffic that is not meant to go out goes out. No one comes in without authorization. So it's always served like a soldier checking. Should this person go in? Should it not? Should I give this person access to go in or not? Should this person come in or not? We have what we call spyware also. You can have this spyware in different places, in your mobile phone. Sometimes they may just come like a pop-up, like an ad, and unknowingly you install it. And what they just do is look through the different activities that occur either on your system or on your smartphone, and they can read your messages, send those information to whoever is watching it at the other side. You may also have what we call the Trojan horse. So I think this is in one of the movies, maybe Troy or so, whereby there is a gift that is being sent to a king. And during that sending of gifts, it was noticed that the gift could not be sent easily, or rather, the soldiers could not come easily into the country. So they disguised and said, we are sending a gift. But inside that big gift of us, we already have those soldiers who are ready to attack coming in at that moment. And immediately the soldiers were able to see that, oh, this is an opportunity. They were able to use it at the right time. So that's what Trojan horse really talks about. Then we have the viruses, which you will all know. We will try to, maybe by doing our next class, we'll try to just write a very small code for a virus, and we'll see how that works. And you will see how they can shut down maybe your system without you knowing. Virtual private network, VPN, you may have also heard about VPN. So it's more like a tunnel. You want to pass an information, but you don't want other people to listen to the information. You just put it inside one tunnel or put it inside one network that some other people will not have access to. So when you are masking a particular information, you can mask it through a VPN and use. Virus and worm, they're a bit related, but the mode of propagation might just be a bit different and how they spread. For worm, most time, it doesn't need a host for it to do its action. A virus will always have a host, but for worm, now it can just reproduce without. And in most cases, worm seems to be much, much powerful than what a virus can even do. in some cases. Then backdoor is just like when you talked about your front end and your back end. So backdoor also, you are coming in, you will not be seen in the front view. You are coming in through the back, for example, to get an authorization in which you are not supposed to gain. And exploits that we have been discussing since, you are attacking a system through different software commands, or you have produced a different scripts for you to be able to exploit and to bridge a secure network to gain an access into an organization. So that's what an exploit really talks about. We talk about malware also. In malware, remember, it's majorly two different words coined together, mal and ware. Mal means malicious, ware is software. So anytime you hear malware, we are talking about combination of malicious software. We're just talking about malicious software. That means that this is not a it is not a good software that is being used, a bad software which can be used to deliver so many things. So it can be in form of worms, virus, Trojan horse, ransomware, botnet, spyware, and all that we have discussed so far. You can also talk about man in the middle attack. You send an information, somebody interfere with the information, then the last information they are getting is different from the original source because somebody is in the middle who has already tampered with the information. That is man in the middle. Then you also talk about phishing. It's more like going to the river to catch a fish. Now you are using a hook which has maybe like an earthworm, for example. When a fish sees an earthworm, the fish will want to take the earthworm. Unfortunately, it hooks the fish and the fish becomes a meal. It's also the same with fishing. Someone might want to send you an information that please open this information is for your own good without knowing that the moment you click on that information or you supply what is needed is being used to attack you. Then there's ransomware. It's just simple word, ransom. You are paying for a ransom. So you have been made, you become an hostage. So before you could be able to have access to a system back, whenever a ransomware attack occur, you will be asked to make some particular payment. If not, all your data will be lost and so what have we learned today so far? We've talked about the fundamental of exploitation. We've talked about common exploits that is being used, the framework, like Metasploit that are also being used, and how this should be done in a controlled environment. We also talk about the overview of web application. We talk about OWASP top 10. And I said during our next class also, we will look at vulnerability assessment, how we can use some tools to be able to do vulnerability assessments, and then we will also be able to introduce or interpret the results of our vulnerability assessment. Sorry that we've taken a little time. I guess we started, I'm just a few minutes behind. So, and then thanks all for the wonderful time so far. So any of your questions, please send any of your questions. Then the admin will collate it and we'll be able to get or send a response to any of the questions in which you have. So thank you all for the wonderful time. We'll be able to meet again during our next class where we have more practical demonstration of what we have learned so far today. Thanks all.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Can you hear me, sir? Hello, Mr. Bumi. Hello?